Well, we're 6 games into the Major League Baseball season, and I'm already pissed off. 156 more games to go, but that's okay, because it's Sunday, April 11th, 2016.
This is not a test.
This is the Wrestling News Experience. After Dark. Can you believe it's only been a week since WrestleMania? In fact, I'm fairly certain that WrestleMania is still going on somewhere. Jesus. I'd really like to talk about NXT TakeOver. We already did that last week, and now I got to talk about WrestleMania, but at least I can talk about Raw. Oh my God. Talk about a tale of, well, 3 companies, because we got the one that put on TakeOver, the one that put on WrestleMania, and the one that put on Raw. And I'm not quite certain that they're not different companies entirely. But first, of course, if you're listening live, there is the chat bubble on your Spreaker.com player. You can join us in the live chat. I can see there's people in there already. Good evening to everyone in the live chat. There's our TWNE After Dark Facebook group. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dave the Camel. And this podcast is, of course, part of the W2M network of podcasts, which includes shows like Wrestling to the Max and a couple others that I can't remember the names of. This podcast is also available on 411mania.com, iTunes, and Spreaker, or it is on Spreaker, but Stitcher. So there's no reason for you not to listen other than the fact that you hate me. And trust me, a lot of people hate me this week. Because after WrestleMania, I came out, and at my job, I wrote a thing where I asked the question, was this WrestleMania one of the worst ever? And of course, when you say something like that, you know people are going to immediately leap to the defense. And I want to get this out of the way first. WrestleMania 32 was not the worst WrestleMania of all time, because we live in a world where WrestleMania 9, 11, 27, and several others exist. WrestleMania 32, not the worst WrestleMania of all time. But I will say that it was some excellent, excellent wrestling that was followed up by some ridiculous ass booking. And therefore, while it wasn't the worst, it was definitely disappointing, and I would not put it up there with good WrestleManias. I would put it as a below average WrestleMania. And I'm going to tell you what happened. And yes, like from the chat says, it will not take me nearly 7 hours to explain why this was a bad show. Or I shouldn't say bad, I should say a disappointing as hell show. And the number one reason is that this is the same company that put on NXT TakeOver 2 days earlier, which was top to bottom a spectacular pay-per-view with no flaws. When the worst match on the card was Austin Aries versus Baron Corbin, that is a perfect pay-per-view. And 2 days later, we get this 7-hour monstrosity of confusing-ass booking in which I still don't know what happened. Literally, I every time there was the match finished at WrestleMania, there was this look on my face like, oh my God, what the hell are they doing? We can go top to bottom. I don't care. I don't want to take forever on it because it is a week in the past, and Raw actually kind of did some stuff to reverse the effects of WrestleMania. But we had the ladder match, which I felt great for Zack Ryder, even though that was a win that nobody could have seen coming. It's a great moment for him. Obviously, the plan, I wish he could have held the title longer, but clearly he was just a transitional guy. It does feel like they just did that to give him that moment, and there was never any plans for him. And it's weird because if you sit there and you listen to his crowd reactions, you sit there and go, well, why not just take the chance on him with the Intercontinental title? Because Who cares? Give another guy a shot, and if the crowd likes him, but here we are, and Zack Ryder got to have a one-day title reign so far. But the point is, um, while I thought it was a great moment, and I thought it could be something interesting, even if it's not, I like the fact that it transitioned the title away from Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and left them free for what they did on Raw. And it moves the Intercontinental title back into other people who aren't those guys who don't need the title, who should be above the Intercontinental title anyway. While I don't entirely agree with it being on The Miz, at least it's something else that frees up guys who should be doing more important things. But we will get to that. That was just the first time, and that was the feel-good moment of the night for me, really. And the pay-per-view just kind of went off a cliff very slowly for the rest of the night. And I'm sorry to all the people who have spent this whole week calling me an idiot who doesn't know anything about wrestling, who complains about stuff. I've been accused of so many things this week. You have no idea. To me, by the end of the night, leading up to the main event, the theme of the evening should be, as it has been in WWE for the last several years, that the Attitude Era was great and the guys that we have now can't get shit done. We have Chris Jericho's beating AJ Styles. We have a team of Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, and Mick Foley beating up both the New Day and the League of Nations. We have, Brock Lesnar was going to beat Dean Ambrose, but in a weirdly short match. Sorry, from the chat, we're going to go back to the ladder match for a second. Chances are that would have been Neville Spot had not gotten hurt, meaning that he wins it. I don't know that he wins it. The spot, obviously, that Zack Ryder filled was supposed to be held by Neville, because Neville was in the middle of that feud when he got hurt. Chances that he wins it, given that every rumor that I've seen out there that the finish to the ladder match was Kevin Owens retaining until literally showtime, I mean, I guess there's a chance of that, but if they still were planning to transition it away from Kevin Owens, then yes, there's a chance it was Neville's spot. I'd give him slightly higher odds. I think if Neville's in the match instead of Zack Ryder, maybe they just have The Miz win instead. I mean, it's not the best win, but it is a win. If they're looking for the same feel-good moment before we head into the Raw where all the bad guys start winning, maybe Neville does come away with it. It's really hard to say because they said that they didn't book a finish to that match until they were literally starting the show. So we've got just a night full of old guys, and and of course The Rock destroying the Wyatt family. And say what you will, there might have still been something left of the Wyatt family, but after WrestleMania, there's nothing left of the Wyatt family, at least in their current incarnation. You don't lose a match to The Rock in 6 seconds and then just bounce back from that. It just doesn't happen. It more than anything, more than the finishes, more than the fact of who lost, that AJ Styles lost, that Dean Ambrose lost, that the New Day lost for no reason, that it just what else? Damn, I don't have a problem with the Andre the Giant Memorial, but what else happened? The fact that Shane McMahon lost. It just seemed like we are continually showing up that these attitude stars who show up for one pay-per-view a year get to beat the crap. And nothing against Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, Mick Foley. They're the best in the world at one point. The Rock, of course, is The Rock. But Mick Foley is retired because he can't physically take bumps. Steve Austin is retired because his neck is fucked up. Shawn Michaels is retired and hasn't wrestled in years. Why are these guys getting one over on not one, but 2 tag teams just for a nostalgia pop? It comes down to who's got to work the next day. And I'm not saying you can't give legends their moments at WrestleMania, but the point is that Steve Austin and Mick Foley and The Rock and The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels have all had WrestleMania moments. When the New Day's WrestleMania moment is that Xavier Woods got to take a stunner from Stone Cold Steve Austin, what kind of a moment is that? That's not a triumphant moment. That's just something cool that happened. I got to be in the ring with a legend. That shouldn't be good enough. Like saying that The Rock put over the Wyatt family because he stood in the ring and said you were supposed to be the best and then beat a guy from him in 6 seconds is not putting them over. It's not giving them the rub. It's beating the crap out of them. It's another guy who wrestles once a year, beating up people who have to work the next day. Yeah, and then where the social outcast was, I mean, the social outcast were in the Battle Royal, but you could have easily switched out the Wyatt family for that. But someone like the social outcast, which is a comedy jobber tag team, could have lost The Rock in 6 seconds, and everybody would have been fine with it because they're funny and they don't win anyway. But again, even at that point, though, the social outcasts are an act that, why aren't they pushing them? Why couldn't they get a win? There's 4 of them. There were more of them in the Battle Royal than anybody else. Now, I don't really have a big problem with the Battle Royal, which we'll get to. But that was what I came away from. And it's ironic on a night where a guy from the Attitude Era put over a guy from the New Generation in the main event. But leading up to that point, the New Generation was getting its ass kicked. And a cynical person would say that this was a way to say, hey, Roman Reigns is a guy because he can beat the Attitude Era and nobody else can. But in reality, what it does is it makes a 5-hour, well, we're not counting the pre-show, but because I was watching the Jays game, but the 5-hour or the 4 hours leading up to Roman Reigns' big win was really depressing because everybody that you cared about got their ass kicked. And it doesn't help that nobody likes Roman Reigns. And whatever they did to him on Raw, which we will talk about, at WrestleMania, the blatant audio cutting, the 27-minute match when the show is already 15 minutes over. I mean, my God, why, for a match where the outcome was known months ago, there was no intrigue in Roman Reigns' ultimate victory. We knew it was going to happen. Did it really need to be 27 minutes long on a show that has already lasted forever? And it is the problem with Triple H's main event matches, especially at WrestleMania, that I've talked about before. It is the difference between epic and long. Because in Triple H's mind, when he's wrestling, sometimes making a match longer means that it's epic. And I've seen epic matches that took 5 minutes. I have seen epic matches that took an hour. The match that happened on WrestleMania, the 27-minute slog fest, where Triple H worked the arm for some particular reason, because, I don't know, that was not an epic match. That was just a long match. And it gets worse when you know what the finish is. Everybody in the stadium, everybody watching, everybody who knows anything about WWE knew that Roman Reigns was beating Triple H on that night. And if that's the case, they should have... I'm not saying you do a 30-second match. I'm saying that 15 minutes. And yeah, like someone in the chat said, this is exactly what I said. Maybe they're just trying to make sure the crowd is too exhausted to boo the crap out of him. And of course, according to every live report I've heard, including from people who I know were there, that did not stop them. The audio, whatever. And WWE can do whatever they want. But what they did at WrestleMania in the main event, where they obviously, like they weren't even subtle about it, turned off the crowd noise so that it would seem like, I don't know, in a stadium with 97,000 people in it, despite whatever they're telling you, 97,000 people, which I don't get why you wouldn't just say that. 97,000 people still beats the 93,000 that you pretend came into WrestleMania 3 by a large margin. Why not just do the legitimate record and then you can say, hey, we did that. But anyway, if they weren't doing crowd suppression in that main event, then 97,000 people sure sounded awfully quiet to me. And either one is bad. Either they were booing everything or they were silent as hell. And either way, for your main event of WrestleMania, that's a bad thing, isn't it? I think, given all their talk about how, as long as they're reacting, it's a good thing, maybe they should have just let them go. And it just, given what happened the next night, the fact that they bothered to try to hide it just confuses the hell out of me. Because in video packages later, you're just going to cut out the booing. So who cares what happens at WrestleMania? Because you've decided this is what's going to happen. You knew this was going to be what you knew they were going to boo the crap out of him. How could you not? And their plan apparently was, we're going to pretend it's not happening. And we've got the ability to cut off crowd mics to do it. And that just, especially given what happened in the opening of Raw the next night, pisses me off. Live with the crowd reactions you've garnered. You can sweeten them if you want, but don't try and sit there and suppress the audience reaction when all you've done for the past 10 years because of John Cena is say, it doesn't matter what the crowd says, as long as they're reacting, we're happy. Because the truth is they're not. With John Cena, it gets away with it because it's cute and it's funny, and half the audience booing is doing it because they're doing it to get a rise, and they're doing it because it's kind of cool to do so, and because there's still a certain level of respect in it. The people booing Roman Reigns did not want to see Roman Reigns. And if that's true, I don't get, given, and I'm going to keep saying this, given what they did the next night, why bother? Because they did the right thing the next night to deal with those crowd reactions. They could have done this at any point up till now, and it would have been fine, but they decided to wait until after WrestleMania, and before that, we're just going to pretend it's not happening. And since we basically did WrestleMania, I've talked about as much as I want. It was not one of the worst. It's definitely in my bottom 10. I'm sorry. Good wrestling, horrible booking. And I was sitting here with my wife and my wife's cousin, and we were trying to watch WrestleMania, and when the Triple H match just keeps going, we're all sitting here screaming at it for it to end. Because there's nothing worse than watching a match that is taking forever when you already know what's going to happen. It was not a 5-star match. It was not epic. It was just long. And that pretty much capped off WrestleMania. It went at 45 minutes over the limit. It lasted forever, and almost nothing good happened. So we roll around to Raw the next night. And I'm in a bad mood already. I am really, WWE is going to have to do something pretty spectacular to get me happier after WrestleMania, and then I have to write about WrestleMania the next morning, and then I get people telling me, you're an idiot, WrestleMania 32 was awesome, and you just complain too much because you're not really a fan. And, that goes with the job, and I'm not saying that I didn't know that coming in, but sometimes you sit there and go, did you actually read what I said? But anyway, so we're getting into Monday Night Raw. And the crowd's going to be crazy, because it is. And then the first thing they do, and this is why, this did not help. To have the announce table sit there and say, basically, we apologize to people watching the show because the audience is going to be crazy, and it's not because of anything we've done, it's going to be just because they're nuts. Speaking of somebody who's come from, quote-unquote, bizarro world, which is apparently Canada, where we cheer who we normally boo, and boo who we normally cheer, but we're having fun, right? I just sat there and go, are you literally kidding me? Are you literally saying that our audience is a bunch of idiots and we're sorry for it, people at home, because they don't know what they're talking about? You know what? As with Roman Reigns, you created this audience. You acknowledged it. You spent the last 2 years saying, yeah, the crowd after WrestleMania is great, and we're going to acknowledge that fact and be as crazy as you want. We're going to work with it. And when you came out, you can't apologize for it. You have to live with what you've done. By talking down to them, by condescending and basically saying, you guys don't know shit. You're just coming out to make a name for it. Well, guess who put the focus on the audience in the first place? If you hadn't done stuff like encourage the fandangoing and have, acknowledge when they're chanting at the announce table, and have the announcer say, oh, they're all having fun out there, and not say, they don't know what they're, and not put on a product that encourages the crowd to rebel, you don't get to sit there and apologize for the fact that the audience isn't acting the way you'd like them to. We made fun of TNA when they did the same thing, when they had people come out and say speeches to the audience about how they're all cast members in a show and they should react appropriately to the material that's going on. Because if they liked the material that was going on, they'd react appropriately. And the good news, the crazy thing is the crowd on Monday Night Raw this week wasn't that crazy. They were completely willing to play ball. Yeah, there was crazy stuff with the beach ball, but it happened during a particularly boring Baron Corbin versus Dolph Ziggler match, and we'll get to that. But by and large, the crowd was playing ball, and they were sitting there, and they just wanted to be entertained by this show. There was no dancing. There was no disruption other than that beach ball, which, is going to happen. There wasn't an attempt to hijack the show. They just wanted to watch the show and participate and be an audience that liked the show that they were watching. But you came out from the beginning and said, no, they're shit. Don't listen to them. And it turns out, especially in stuff like the main event and the guys just before that, the crowd was into it. But you've already said that they don't know what they're doing. Not that it matters because nobody watched the third hour anyway. But I want to skip over the first 2 hours because the first 2 hours actually weren't that good. The show was largely carried by the third hour. But I want to address, and I've already done this before, but I want to address, we go back to Roman Reigns. And on Raw, they just let the crowd go. And the crowd just goes nuts with booing with him. And they do the perfect thing with Roman Reigns and they have him say, you know what? I don't care. He doesn't do the John Cena, you can do whatever you want and I'll laugh about it. Roman Reigns said it in a way like where he said, I don't care. I'm the champ. Deal with it. And that is exactly the character that Roman Reigns should have been playing the whole time. And he doesn't have to be heel, and he doesn't have to be face. He's Roman Reigns. He doesn't give a shit. He's got the title, and he knows he's better than you. And this title proves that he's better than you. And it doesn't matter if he's good or bad. He's just Roman Reigns. He's too cool for school, and that's the character we've been waiting for him to play. And I'm not saying they aren't going to fumble it horribly. But in that moment, the part where he said, I'm just the guy, and all the facial expressions and the shooing motions he made when everybody else came out to challenge him, that's the arrogant sort of guy that we were looking for from him, whatever his alignment. He's interesting. He's saying things that we believe he believes. When he's fumbling through scripted material, you don't believe it because he's bad at delivering it. But when he does what he did on Monday, it was believable because I believe that guy is a dick. And maybe he's the nicest guy in the world. I know he loves his kids and all that. Maybe he's nice. But you know what? You look at Roman Reigns and you think, that guy's a dick. And maybe they should lean into that. And they did on Monday, and it worked. He doesn't ever have to turn actually heel. Because that's just a thing. That doesn't matter. This is what, I don't like the term, but this is a Shades of Grey thing. Where, he's fighting heels, but he's a dick. You can hate him if you want, but he doesn't care. If you like him, great. If you don't, he's got no time for you. And that is a good character. And one day, maybe people will cheer him and it will all come together. I would turn him. But whatever the case, whatever his alignment, I like the character that they showed on Monday, which is a character that he should have had the whole time, and is largely the fact why he's getting the shit boot out of him. Because even though he wasn't playing that character, we all believed he was that character. And of course tonight on that Raw, we had a lot of debuts. And it wasn't always the people I would have thought should have come out. I did not see Apollo Crews coming, although if they're not going to do anything with him in NXT, maybe he's one of those kinds who's better that he's up there to learn on the fly. Because he can wrestle, and he's going to be the guy eventually. And he's at least going to get an even shot. I don't think he's ready, but at least they're going to give him a shot. Baron Corbin might as well send him up. I question the wisdom of giving him a 50-50 match with Dolph Ziggler that he loses by double countout, but I guess they don't want to have him do squash matches for another year, and that's all right. But it's kind of telling when Apollo Crews won basically a squash match, and Baron Corbin had to go for 10 minutes of 50-50 with Dolph Ziggler. It doesn't, when you just made the guy look dominant and win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale, it seems like a step back for him. Because if he's having trouble with Dolph Ziggler, how dominant can he be? And then I want to make sure I don't miss anybody before I get to the big ones. Well, we had the Vaudevillains debut on SmackDown, but and I hope the best for them, but I just don't see them lasting long on any relevant level. The act is great, but it does not have a long shelf life. And of course, right before the main event, we had, right when I thought it wasn't going to happen, we got Enzo and Cass, and the crowd loves them, and I love them, and they're great, and Enzo is so great. The funny thing is, I watched some old stuff where Colin Cassidy actually got to do half the promos, and he's good too. But Enzo is so much better that he gets to do all the promo, and Cass just has to say his catchphrase, and that's fine. And if they're this popular now, then they can be great. They can do great things. But again, the announce table kind of sits there and goes, "Well, they're an acquired taste, folks." And I'm like, do you even listen to the audience that's out there? They're 100% behind these guys because they're cool and they're different, and they're schooling the Dudley Boys on the microphone. So I hope the best for them because they're really good, and I hope they get their legitimate chance. But I'm just sitting there, I am in awe at how bad the announce table is. On a weekend where we had TakeOver and Mauro Ranallo calling the pre-show, the number one booth in WWE was the number 3 booth in terms of quality. And that's wrong. That shouldn't be the case. You've got Corey Graves and Todd Phillips. Todd Phillips, who sounded so lost on SmackDown, comes in NXT, and he and Corey Graves have like this chemistry where they like, I don't want to call it, Gorilla and Bobby stuff, like and Bobby Heenan stuff, but it is the same thing. It's the banter where you got the guy trying to call play while still bantering with his partner who's heelish and doesn't really like the guy he's stuck with, and they take shots at each other back and forth, and it works. And on SmackDown, you've got, and in the pre-show, you have Ranallo, who's just sounds like a big fight announcer, and you got Lawler back in his heel character, and again, it just works. And then you've got the dipshits Michael Cole, who has no credibility, and JBL just shouting over people, and Byron Saxton, who might as well not be there. And it just seems wrong that that's the number 1 team. And I just, especially when you're doing stuff like watching a 7-hour pay-per-view or watching 3 hours of Raw, you have to listen to this inane chatter that sounds stupid. And I don't understand why that's the case. I guess I kind of do, but it just doesn't make sense. There's nobody back there that can sit there and say, wow, the commentary is so much better on our other 2 shows. Why can't Raw be like that? Because it's actually detracting from the product at this point. This is almost as bad as when Michael Cole turned heel and spent the entire show shitting on the product. Somehow he has less credibility when he's promoting it. Now, of course, we touched briefly on how the stupidity of Shane McMahon losing his match because, hey, remember how we spent 3 weeks talking about how WWE programming has been so terrible for the last while and he was going to change everything? Yeah, about that. He was not going to change it. He just lost, and all the last 6 weeks didn't matter. But hey, he gets to run Raw anyway for the night. And it was a great glimpse of things to come if he had won and got to run Raw, because he was barely there. And it's refreshing to have a general manager who is not hip deep in every single thing that's happening on the show, or cutting 20-minute promos every time the show starts, or just dicking around with wrestlers for no particular reason. It was nice and refreshing, and I really hope they have a plan to make sure that continues. But it didn't make any sense why he got to run Raw. Vince McMahon literally put his son's life on the line, put him in the Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker, threatened The Undertaker with retirement, and then, what the hell, just run Raw anyway. I mean, I know we talk about Vince being senile, but sometimes you really have to wonder. But yeah, so by and large, the show was not great. It just wasn't. There was the awkward title presentation where Charlotte got sidetracked by the crowd, but even before, the segment wasn't going to be any good. Even if it had gone off as written, it really didn't seem like a good segment. But it almost was saved by the last between Enzo and Cass in the last hour and the main event with the Fatal 4-Way match, and you sit there and go, like, first when it's announced, you sit there and go, do you suddenly just realize that the main event of Raw is now involves Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Chris Jericho, and AJ Styles, and those four people could have a great match without even thinking about it beforehand. And then Sami Zayn gets taken out as kind of a reward for the fact that he already had 2 grueling matches that weekend. And as the biggest surprise in the world, we get Cesaro back in an incredible suit that I hope he gets to keep that suit every week, the Tearaway. And he's out there, and he looks awesome, and he doesn't even win the match, but he still looks awesome. And you start to think, this is why they brought up all those NXT guys in a chunk, because they just basically took the top of their mid-card and made it the main event. And I'm okay with that if this is what the future holds, where these guys who wrestled in that Fatal 4-Way plus Sami Zayn are at least a significant part of the main event now. There's some hope out there. I mean, John Cena will be back someday, and Randy Orton will be back someday, hopefully in reduced roles. But for the moment, we just basically took all the best wrestlers on the main roster and put them in the main event. And think of all the fresh match. I didn't even think about the matchups that could happen. When Cesaro came back and suddenly he was facing off across the ring from AJ Styles, and I sat there and go, oh my god, that's a match I never even knew I actually wanted. Because I didn't even think about it. But think about it. I mean, I don't want to get all like hyped up because, God knows they've disappointed us before, but you have, when you sit there and think, they literally just, that's the main event now, and maybe for a few weeks to come at least. And it suddenly starts to fall into places that with all the injuries really did put them into a scramble mode for WrestleMania, and they decided to literally put their head down and get through WrestleMania, and then we can change everything. Because we just have to make sure we had enough matches to make WrestleMania, and then afterwards, we'll just set everything back up. Yeah, it sucked. We had months. We had Sheamus up feuding with as a world champion for some reason. We had weeks with the champion, or weeks with Roman Reigns not even on Raw. We had, a lot of Dean Ambrose. As much as I like him, we had a lot of Dean Ambrose, even though his challenger wasn't even there. We had the nonsensical Shane McMahon and The Undertaker stuff. And all of it was basically, at this point, it really looks like they just wanted to get through WrestleMania. They wanted to get there, get their 100,000 people, get out, and then we can start planning with what we have. Without worrying about when John Cena's due back, or when Randy Orton's due back, or when Seth Rollins is due back. We can finally look at what we have and plan from there. I'm not saying they're going to plan well or plan long. I'm just saying it sure seems like they were just trying to get to the Raw after WrestleMania where they can finally call up some people, fill in the gaps, and make things work again. Because the big show is out of the way, and we can start over. It's a natural reset point. And they didn't reset everything, and they didn't restart everything, but there was a freshness about Raw in the end when you realize that suddenly they have switched everything. There's a tag team division because they debuted two new teams last week, plus whatever Primo and Epico are supposed to be. They moved a couple people up to the mid card division in Apollo Crews and Baron Corbin. They didn't promote any new women, but there's a women's title and the women's division, and the term Divas is gone. Outside of Total Divas, of course, which is not WWE's purview. And the main event is a bunch of guys that we want to see in the main event. And the main event of Payback, although it's not officially announced, I assume it will be at some point, the main event right now is Roman Reigns and AJ Styles. Yeah, we didn't get Bullet Club. That may still happen, it may not, but we didn't get it yet. Oh well. We got some interesting stuff. We have I don't want to hate, you don't want to say it. We've got hope that something different is actually happening. It didn't happen with Shane McMahon, but something different has happened. Like, the Authority wasn't on Raw at all. Did you miss him? I didn't miss him. Dean Ambrose wasn't there, and that's okay. Brock Lesnar's probably gone until SummerSlam. Now is the time when they try to figure out what they've got. And what they've got is pretty good. I mean, I still don't have any faith in the creative team to do it right, but at least I'm sitting there going, I'm going to get AJ Styles in the main event of a WWE pay-per-view. I'm still not okay with him losing to Chris Jericho, but it's a rebound. If the feud goes off okay, nobody will remember that he lost to Chris Jericho at WrestleMania. Except me when I have to go back for statistics for, like, stuff I do at work. So as bad as WrestleMania was, and it was bad, and I will not apologize for saying that WrestleMania 32 was bad. It was not the worst, but I will not apologize for saying that it was a bad pay-per-view. It was bad WrestleMania. For as bad as it was, Raw was not spectacularly everything is all better, but it was good. It had a great third hour. The first 2 hours weren't great, but they weren't, like, offensive. And I come out of it going, I would like to see what happens next. And that's what I asked for. I would like to see what happens next. That's all I want to come out of my pay-per-views and come out of my Raws. I want to know what happens next. I want to have that feeling of I can't wait to see what happens next. And I don't get that more often than not. And I wish I did. Now, what else do we have this week? NXT this week was a recap show, so I didn't watch it. I mean, I didn't really feel compelled to watch the Drifter wrestle, so I didn't watch the recap show. Sorry. I have kept up to date on Lucha Underground, which I continue to say you should watch, especially if you're tired of WWE. If you want some alternative, Lucha Underground is right there. It's on iTunes. I know it'll cost some money, but it's there. There are other ways to watch it. It's definitely worth your time. It's different. And the wrestling isn't always the best, although there is good wrestling. But you can't say it's boring. And I've had fun watching it, and part of it is the format, part of it is the length, a lot of it just works. So I'm glad that show exists, and I will continue to watch Lucha Underground as often as I can. What even happens? Oh, right, Matanza beat up Phoenix, and Mel Mortes beat up Matanza. Yes, that's right. I'd forgotten. Been a long week, let me tell you. Between WrestleMania and Raw and the Blue Jays stinking up the joint, and don't get me started on that. But yeah, I think at the end of it, that's what I can say, is we've actually seen change. Whether it lasts is another story. But I don't know how you could not come out of Raw and not feel good. And if you didn't, you could go back and watch TakeOver, because you can watch I could watch Zayn Nakamura forever. And after WrestleMania, I kind of wanted to watch it again. But by then it was nearly midnight, and I really didn't want to watch anything else at that point. hey, WrestleMania could have always been worse. They could have had Roman set up for a spear, and then he goes for the spear, and we never see who he hits. But what kind of show would be stupid enough to do that? So I think that we're good for this week. Is that enough? Is that a good recap for WrestleMania bad, Raw good, Takeover great? But we already covered Takeover last week, so I can't continue to heap praises upon it, even though it deserves it. Um, Someone said that all the tag teams going up to Raw does screw over the tag team division in NXT, and yeah, it kind of does. But at the same time, they'll build it back up in time for the Dusty Classic, and they'll focus on something else. Like maybe they'll actually focus on the main event guys or the women's division again. That's the good thing about NXT is because, again, of the format, and you got the Cruiserweight thing coming up even, which will not take NXT's time, but I bet there'll be qualifying matches on NXT. You can always focus on something else for a while and build up your guys, and they'll probably have it built up in time for the Dusty Classic in the end of the year. But that's the whole idea. It is actually fulfilling its goal of developmental. It sent a bunch of people up to the main roster who were ready to go, at least in their eyes. That's what it's supposed to do. And hey, if all else fails, they've signed Bobby Roode, although not officially, and him and Austin Aries could tag up and face American Alpha a bunch, and I think we'd all be happy with that. What else is going on? I am playing World of Warcraft again. I'm a bad person, but I've grown to be okay with that. Um, if you wish to join me in World of Warcraft, and even if you just want to talk about me being a bad person, I am Dave the Camel, hashtag 1982. And I will play with anybody. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. I'm also, of course, playing Stardew Valley and some Division, and man, I've backlogged myself horribly again, haven't I? That well. Running out of steam fast. Okay, so big finish, of course. Um, Podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening to me for another week. Listen to me ramble, talk about Raw, talk about WrestleMania, and everything else. As always, this podcast is available on our Facebook group, TWNE After Dark. It's available on Spreaker.com, on iTunes, Stitcher, and at 41mania.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Dave the Camel. And of course, we are part of the W2M podcast network. All some good stuff on there. You can follow them on Facebook at Wrestling2, the number 2, the max. Other than that, the podcast will return next Saturday at about midnight. You can follow the Facebook group for exact times. I can't wait for Civil War. But other than that, we'll see you next week. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a good one. Always be a fan.